Take a good look. This is Scotland, known for its natural beauty and culture. But in just a few years, it might not look like this because of rising sea levels and too much carbon dioxide in the air thanks to climate change. It's been labelled mankind's most dangerous experiment, but what does that mean and how can it really affect Scotland? Right now, we live in a society where everyone wants that latest thing, even if it means the price could be our planet. But now with people buying futuristic cars, living in tiny houses, and new legislation being passed, could Scotland become a leader in the battle against climate change? It's affecting everything, from the economy to politics to ordinary people's daily routine. Climate change is no longer just a weather story.
This will be the biggest, most dangerous experiment mankind has ever undertaken, and I stand by that statement.
I think that we need to really have a better aspect on the way we look after the planet, because ultimately we've only got one home.
Don't want to be an old man of 80 or 90 years old and then look back and think, God, I wish I'd done more to tackle climate change.
If we lose this one, we've lost Scotland.
So what exactly is climate change, and what effects is it going to have in Scotland? I spoke to leading experts in the field to get a better insight and understand the consequences that climate change could have.
As simple as I can explain climate change would be that our whole atmosphere, the temperature of the planet is regulated and it's lovely. I mean, the average temperature on Earth is around 14-15 degrees centigrade, which allows us to live. And that's all down to the greenhouse effect. It's down to these gases which we can't see, they're in trace amounts, but in our atmosphere, and they retain some of the heat which is emitted from the Earth. So when the sun shines down, it warms the Earth up, and if we didn't have these gases in the atmosphere, we would be a big ball of ice, because all that energy would just go back into space. But these greenhouse gases, they retain some of that heat and they make it nice for us to live, stop it being a ball of ice.
Every other period of history when there's been a warming in Europe, there's been a cooling somewhere else in the world. This is the one time when there is warming everywhere. And it sort of, to me, you know, in a nice little diagrammatic sense, debunks that thing. You know, people going, oh, no, you know, this is just scaremongering or whatever. It's really clear that this is going on everywhere. It will make bits of Scotland wetter, bits of Scotland drier, and all of Scotland warmer. So a lot of people would say, well, that's not a bad thing. And I think, you know, if you're really blunt put a little box around Scotland, you might say for Scotland, it's not a disaster. All of that has an ecological impact. So if I raise the temperature of Scotland by 1 degree, then there are a whole lot of plants and species that can't live at the top of our mountains.
Climate change is going to have a significant impact on the world. Some of the statistically less likely scenarios for the likely of where climate change might get us are really quite scary, and so, you know, it's something that we therefore have a responsibility to act so that it doesn't become so scary for future generations.
It's clear that ice sheets will begin to melt and sea level will rise absolutely enormously. So, you know, it becomes almost the stuff of books. So Scotland has lots of renewable energy, so we made a shift towards renewable energy, which was both economically and carbon sensible. But the next thing will be, for instance, to stop using petrol in our cars. That's a much bigger challenge.
Well, you don't pay for petrol or diesel. It doesn't pollute. It's very, very fast, very quick. And from a techie point of view, it's quite cool. We have a Tesla Model S that we got in 2014, and a Tesla Model X, which is just a few weeks old. So it's sitting at 21% just now, and I can decide what I wanted to charge up to, so it's ready to get charged to 80%. It's really nice to drive, and it's becoming more normalised. It's certainly easier now than it was when we first got the car, because the charges were a bit slower then, and it took a bit longer to go on the journeys, but now it's pretty much drive anywhere. It's drive from the Arctic Circle above Norway down to the very southern tip of Italy without paying a penny for any fuel.
Learn a lot about types of chargers and sockets and things like that, and you have to use about 3 or 4 apps on your phone so you know which ones are out of order and how long it'll take to charge you and all that sort of thing.
I've been concerned about global warming for kind of many years. My first degree at uni was in politics, and I remember reading up on global warming and kind of the way that governments were struggling to get to grips with the issue of global warming, and I kind of thought, well, maybe it's up to ordinary people to do their bit. And so I took the decision when I was quite young, I think when I was about 18, that I wouldn't get in aeroplanes, which is something I've more or less stuck to since. Before I had an electric car myself, I assumed that it was maybe something that only very rich people could afford to do, or only people that wanted to pour money down a drain. But then when I started to look into it, I found that actually in many ways, you know, there are a lot of important initiatives that keep the cost of electric driving down, such as the free or heavily subsidised charging, and such as the being exempt from road tax. And for these reasons, I kind of thought, well, if it makes financial sense, then why not? I think it's just concern for our future, and by that I mean everybody's future. So I think a general concern for the environment, just because I don't want to be an old man of 80 or 90 years old and then look back and think, God, I wish I'd done more to tackle climate change, you know. So I'm trying to just do my bit, I suppose.
Scotland is also trying to do their bit by encouraging renewable energy like solar panels and wind farms. Whiteley Wind Farm is the biggest in Europe, with 140 turbines just to the south of Glasgow. Every single one of these turbines have enough energy to power 1,000 homes. In Scotland there are over 60 wind farms and hundreds more being planned to follow. But not everyone is happy about this.
We are Save Straighten for Scotland. We were formed almost 5 years ago now in response to 5 different applications to build wind farms around our village and around our community. And those 5 different applications from 5 different businesses each wanted to build essentially an industrial power station out in and around this community that would have amounted to 130 industrial wind turbines. And as a community of some 270 souls, we weren't happy about that. So today is a bit of a gathering, a get-together, a celebration, but also an opportunity for us to talk about what's next in our campaign. So we have just won our 3rd outright defeat of a wind farm developer. So of the 5 that we've been fighting with, 3 of them have been defeated outright by this community and by its people. That is 90 turbines gone that will not be built.
This last fight we've got to do, this, to my view, Lynfern is the crux of wind farms in Scotland. If we lose this one, we've lost Scotland. And that's no kidding. Ayrshire, with the highest percentage of wind turbines per head of population anywhere in the UK, we've had enough.
What the electricity do is very, very low in a lot of the wind farms. This is again, I'm trying to remember the website we're on. It gives you a scale of all the wind farms and it tells you their output. And you're talking about maybe 20%, 10% output. That's not efficient at all.
So you look at the impact the turbines would have in the community, it'd be quite a lot, because it'd be quite visible, particularly this. There's a couple of developments, one that's left, which is Lynfern, and it would be impact just visually, and also might put off a lot of tourists coming to the area as well.
The ideal solution for us right now is for the Lynfern wind farm to be refused permission, so that it can't make our lives a misery.
I mean, every window in the house is geared towards that view, so every window from our house will see turbines.
Nobody came to bother to talk to us, nobody came to even consider there might be somebody living in the house. This is when this whole thing started kicking off.
Well, I think it's more at it, and more it's a case of, well, they're a bit too close for comfort, so we'll ignore them. And if we ignore them, they're not there.
They'll maybe go away, but no, we're not going away. We're retired. We're not in a position to go and buy another house and move somewhere else. So we're sticking with it and we're fighting them.
Personally, I feel that there shouldn't be anywhere as picturesque as this place. I think there should be more industrialised sites. It's not that I'm against wind farms, and it's not that it shouldn't be my backyard, it's that it shouldn't be the MD's backyard.
Very important, I think, for you to understand that we are not anti-wind, and we're certainly not anti-renewables. You know, if you look around our village, you'll see that there are no photovoltaics anywhere in the village. And that's not because our community isn't committed to renewables and doing our bit. Of course we are. It's because they're not allowed to have them, because it might spoil the look of the conservation village. And so the irony of that, the sheer absurdity that you can't put a photovoltaic panel on your roof because it might spoil the look of the village, but you can put 130 giant industrial turbines in a circle around us. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Let's say you're going to Glasgow for the weekend. A bit of shopping, a bit of music, go for the crack. Maybe Whiteley wouldn't bother you. Maybe it wouldn't. But people do not come to Strayton for the nightlife. They come for the hills, for the peace. They come for the walking and the cycling and the fishing. They come because it's beautiful. And so destroying that beauty will destroy the very thing that keeps this village alive. 90 turbines down, 40 more to go. 3 developers defeated, 2 more to go. So today is about celebrating the win, celebrating the success. And then it's also about galvanising this community for our next fight, because it is endless and it is exhausting and it is heartbreaking. It's got to be done, because no one else is going to come and save us.
So it seems there's 2 sides to the benefits of renewable energy in some cases. I went to visit the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh to find out what they thought about renewable energy and to find out if they considered themselves leaders in the battle against climate change.
So the biggest cause of climate issues in the planet is the production of energy. So if you reduce that or you create more of that from much greener sources, that changes that balance. So the targets that we set, we've exceeded those, and we've now set new targets in order to do that. Cases extracting anything at the ground is a negative impact on the environment. So it's about shifting away that balance away from that and shifting it much more to green energy schemes. But it could also be about how do you do those processes cleaner with less impact on the environment. So there's a whole academy of work in Aberdeen being done right now, and how do we extract oil and gas from the land and from the North Sea primarily in a much more cleaner and less environmentally impactful way, and some of that work's being done right now. So that's maybe something a bit 5-10 years down the line, but it would make a huge difference, because then you won't have oil spills into the sea, you won't have gas it spills into the sea, and the impact that then has on the whole marine environment and then the food chain.
I think the greatest thing that happened in Scotland in terms of our action on climate change was the Climate Change Act Scotland. So that was something where every single member of the Scottish Parliament agreed that climate change was a real risk.
It all goes back to Climate Change Act, which was passed in 2009. And that kind of one of the big things they pushed on was trying to reduce the emissions that come out of Scotland, which has seen emissions go down by about 38% since 2015, which is pushing towards a 2020 target of 42%. So they're doing quite well with that, and it's the longer term goal is for 80% reduction, which is a huge amount of reduction in CO2. The targets that we got from the Climate Change Scotland Act back in 2009, they were very they were pushing things forward with that. It was quite a big target to go for. That has been, I think for the whole country that's very beneficial in terms of trying to show that we can be world leaders in trying to tackle climate change. Obviously there's limitations to what we can do. We're a small country, but we need to show that we are willing to stand up and do our little bit that we can do, that can then perhaps show other countries, we need to follow with that as well. That's certainly a good way forward.
If you look at Scotland, Scotland has a diaspora of people around the world who look back to Scotland. They really do. It's really interesting as you go around the world that people relate back to Scotland. So I think actually yes, Scotland can do something. So we're lucky in several senses. We actually have the ability. I'm going to get shot for saying this, but it's relatively easy because we have a relatively small number of people. We have to be in a location that has quite good renewable resources. So there are things that we can do that are probably easier for Scotland than they are for other countries, but it means that we can start the game going. But the second part of that is that people will look at what's happened in Scotland and go, back in my home, that's what they've done, we should do that. So I think, you can't underestimate the selling image that Scotland has across the planet.
I think it's a justice issue, it's a social justice issue. We've got a bit of a social conscience. I've just done an interview on destitution and asylum and refugees there, and it was the interviewer is English, and she's saying to me, but why are we different in Scotland compared to the rest of the UK? And I think it's that justice, it's about justice and fairness. So if you look at what we've got in Scotland and the sources of renewable energy we've had renewable energy in Scotland for decades in hydro schemes. But if you look at the environment that we've got, the mountains, the lochs, the sea area, the marine protected areas that we have, the absolutely fantastic outdoor areas that we have, now you don't want that spoiled because you've just not given a thought to it. So I think married up with that sense of fairness and social justice and preserving the great environment we already have, it just makes sense, I would suspect. And lots of people around the world have taken the lead from Scotland as well. So we've become a bit of a world leader in this, but not just that we're away, jumping away ahead, it's we're taking people with us, because the whole planet won't survive unless, if we can look after our wee patch, but it has to be much, much wider than that. So there's a whole global responsibility there, and somebody needs to take the lead, so why not us?
I don't know if it is the world leader, but it is right up there in terms of what it's put together legislatively, and actually at the moment we're even meeting the targets. So at the moment we're right up there in terms of what we've managed to achieve.
Getting people to think about what they value, things that they love about the world, about their homes, about their communities, about their families, or whatever, and think about the impact climate change might have on them, and that kind of helps bring it home to people. And then look at timescales and things like that, people's grandchildren or whatever. But also then turning that on its head and saying, well, actually you can do something. So rather than people going away and going, well, that's terrible, I can't do anything about it, but actually say, okay, what's the one thing that you can do in your, the change that you can make? And also people being prepared to say to their governments, actually, we're willing to make a significant change in the way that we live in order to have an impact to improve things. So.
Oh, I mean, the biggest thing for for your average person in Scotland is down to your own waste, and that's try and maximise your recycling, try and reduce consumption, reduce even reduce using the electricity, so that the whole one of switching off lights and things like that is it's a big thing. It's for everybody's benefit, for our children, our grandchildren. Certainly, that's what I look forward to seeing is we keep on aiming on these things and push the targets as high as we possibly can.
The only way we will resolve climate change is with a mass movement, and to an extent, it's beginning to be there. So it does actually come down to what we do. We feel, we believe, we're prepared to put up with, and that's the bit I suppose where governments come in. But there has to be a desire and a demand from people. We have all this argument about how do we persuade people to do things. Every night I go home and I wash up the used orange juice container, swirl it out, get yucky and put it in a bin. And I put it in a bin because my kids nag me that we should recycle more. Over quite a short period of time, we went from being poor at recycling to not bad at recycling. So it isn't that we can't do it, we can do it. It's just about getting it in our psyche, and a lot of it is about children nagging parents. Interesting things that is emerging about climate change is that actually climate change is not as unique as we think it is. So climate change really is the most pressing and telling example of unsustainable resource use. And it's just that in this case, the resource that we've used unsustainably is our atmosphere, which impacts on our climate. It's becoming increasingly clear that the 10 million people that we're predicting will be living on the planet cannot all have the same Western lifestyle that we have, in the sense of the way we live it at the moment. So at the moment we live in an enormously disposable life. I mean, you can do really simple things like don't throw this in the bin, send it, even if you stick it in a bag in my local post office, you send it to a charity. So let's try and start that whole, and the other thing that I have a great fight with my children over is, you replace this when it breaks, not when the iPhone 7 comes out, because it's just this and we've got to this horrible world, I think, where everybody is expected to have the latest gizmo, and whereas what we used to do was wait until our car broke and then we bought a new car, and you'd buy a new car probably of whatever was new at that point, but you weren't replacing it for the sake of being seen to have the newest thing. And I think that's really changed in my lifetime. This idea that the right thing to do is to have the newest one of everything, as opposed to you wait until it breaks and you replace it. And we're all responsible for that, individually, and there's no doubt that marketing is all out there to persuade you should upgrade your phone. You get an email from your supplier saying, oh, you can now get a free upgrade, which when you look into it isn't terribly free. So if you take the classic example of a phone, this is full of all sorts of precious metals, and when we're done with it we throw it away, as opposed to when we're done with it returning it to somebody who will take those precious metals out, and most of this, when I'm done with it, is perfectly reusable.
Can we make our buildings and our farms and our kind of homes more resilient, better protected in the face of some climate change, which is going to happen whatever we do?
Some people have already made huge strides in stepping outside this consumer society. By customising their surroundings to be more happy and have a more green lifestyle. I visited one man who'd even made a career out of it.
This is Jonathan Avery from Tiny House Scotland, and I'd like to show you the nest house. Come with me. So what we have here is a 25 metre square tiny house, which basically is a timber frame structure, and it's really well insulated and really solidly built. It's built with really sustainable materials and has very low energy requirement. This is the front door, for example, which is, when you come in you'll see it's much thicker than a normal front door, because it's actually got insulation in the thickness of the door as well. And then it has weather seals that mean it sucks shut. Well, Tiny House Scotland may sound very grand, but actually it's just me. I've always been a bit of a radical person in terms of kind of what I wanted to do. If I have an idea and I can envisage something, then I want to get on and do it and build it. Being a bit autistic as well, I've always had that streak that I wanted to be self-sufficient and just do things myself. I'm self-taught on everything I do. I haven't trained or done anything. So it's when it came to this concept for a tiny house, obviously I was going to conceive the whole thing and design it and build it myself. This is the main living space in here, which combines a kitchen, a flexible eating, working, sitting area, a proper sofa, and a solid fuel stove, which isn't needed much because it's so warm in here, because you're not using a lot of the Earth's resources to do it. If it's built properly, and this particular house is not built to be anything like a caravan or a shed or anything temporary, it's built with long-term aims in mind. For example, the wooden cladding on the outside is a sustainable produced resource, but which is actually it's a material called thermowood, which is heat treated, so no chemicals involved, but the resins are modified slightly in it, which means that it has a service life of 30 years, even untreated. And if you put an eco coating on that, we've got a 60-year service life. So if you use the materials in the right way, they can last long term, and obviously that's benefiting the planet because you're not continually building things and trashing them and throwing them away and starting again. So it's a circular economy idea, really. keeps everything small and tight. It's a flexible layout, so the sofa and the table can be swapped over. There is also modular furniture in here. For example, you can see this little bookcase here is on wheels. And the point behind that is that under the stairs there's more modular furniture which all nests into the space behind there. So that bookcase actually nests in here as well. So there's lots of hidden storage to use the space efficiently. And then through here we have the bathroom, which is very small but has everything you need in it. So the toilet's there and the wash basin and a small Japanese style deep soak tub with a shower unit. Everything you need within that little space, and also there's all sorts of hidden storage in here as well, so there are storage compartments as well. And then if you want to go around and up the stairs, there is a sleeping loft up there, lots of hidden storage again, storage on the stairs. And then, being of a scientific bent as well as a designer, I think it always kind of stuck in my mind that there were different ways of doing things, that we could be more autonomous and generate our own power and in our own footprint, sort of thing. So for me, I suppose that's always been a big guiding principle in the background, that particularly with architecture, green architecture is a huge subject in terms of the house is the basic form of shelter that human beings have, and we all need it. We all need something to keep the rain off and the wind out, and for us to be comfortable and safe. And a house embodies that actual principle. And that all drove me to design my nest house, which we're sitting in now, which has a quality there in terms of the light that comes in, the warmth. It's really well insulated. There's very little energy requirement in it. You can have solar panels on it. So it's a very sustainable way of living and a very small footprint. And as well, you know, it covers things like, for example, there aren't hundreds of tons of concrete foundation under us. I meet a lot of people through my tiny house business who are wanting to re-examine their lives really and live in a different way and say, do you know, do I really need to pay, or do I need to raise a mortgage for $150,000 and be paying it off over 30 years and working in order to do that? You know, it would be really attractive if you could provide your own means of living much more cheaply. And indeed, of course, it's much more sustainable, because the point is that you don't need so much stuff. If you really stop and evaluate what you need, you don't need loads of stuff. I mean, we find ourselves in a real consumerist society, and a lot of this is, without getting too radical about it, a lot of it is driven by big corporate business and advertising and what we all expect that we should be doing and buying and having. And I think, you know, times have changed a great deal in terms of what people can really evaluate for themselves as what they need out of life in order to be happy. I think I've come from a background where we were very commerce driven as a business in a commercial sense, and I guess profit's the king at the end of the day, whereas these days I feel that there's a deeper reason in society that we should produce things that we need, and the important thing about that is the quality of what we produce and the sustainability of it. And also I think that we need to really have a better aspect on the way we look after the planet, because ultimately we've only got one home.
So take a good look. This is Scotland, this is the world, and this is our home. But if we don't start looking after it, embracing its new technology and respecting its landscapes, all of this will soon be gone. There's still time for us to fight climate change and make the planet even better. You can still save the world. The choice is yours.